This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Should sex and relationship classes be compulsory in primary schools? What do you think? The Commons Education Committee said absolutely. They've concluded without statutory status, schools wouldn't give curriculum time to personal, social and health education and sex and relationship education. And these are sensitive subjects. Teachers need to be confident, have the skills to deliver effective and proper classes, but it's absolutely vital that on an age-appropriate basis they are taught. 3 to 6 years old, we're talking about the differences between boys and girls, naming body parts, using correct scientific vocabulary, which is vital for safety, it is argued, where babies come from, what areas of the body are private, should not be touched, who they should talk to if they are worried or concerned. Let's talk to Lynette Burrows, writer and broadcaster. Good morning.
Good morning.
And John Rees, personal, social and health education consultant, trains teachers on how to talk to young people about sex. Hello, John.
Good morning.
Lynette Burrows, this is entirely sensible, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is. It's just more of the same that's failed so drastically, really, in the past. I mean, age appropriate. I'm listening to your little blurb for it. It all sounds such piffle to me. I mean, age appropriate to 3 and 4 year olds. I mean, come on. And the best protection that children have, in my opinion, is reticence and modesty. And the fact that when any adult starts talking dirty to them, their danger signs should flash and the child should run. As my mother always used to say, if anybody stops in a car and asks you to get in, just run. And that's their greatest protection, because they can't argue about it. And lulling them into a false sense that the whole world is benign by talking sex to them when they're too young to understand what it's all about. They are not aware of the fact that they've got paedophiles around them in other circumstances. So no, I'm dead against it.
Mm. John?
I'm just drawing breath, I think. Goodness, I'm really surprised to hear those comments. It would be lovely to think that we could wrap children in cotton wool and safeguard them from all the horrors and the evils and nasty things happening out of the world. But we know that we live in an extraordinarily sexualized society. And I think we also need to remember that this is not just about teaching sex education, it's a teaching about relationships education. It's not just primary schools the House of Commons Select Committee are recommending, but right through to secondary schools. We live in a society where young people are preyed upon and are vulnerable to, and I think we've got to give them the skills and the values and the information to be able to keep themselves safe.
But how does telling them about something that they haven't got an interest in at 3 and 4 years old, and they don't have the emotional experience to deal with when they're 7 and 8 years old, how does that make them safer?
I think it's not just a question of working with children, it's a question of working with schools, with working with parents.
No, I'm talking about young children. Accepted sex education for secondary children is a different matter. The controversial area is primary school children.
And why is that controversial?
Because they're far too young for it, and people have always recognised that young children have a period of innocence. Sexuality is very latent when they're very young, and actually crashing in on that with all sorts of information given to them by adults that they're in no position to understand, have been empowered to do this, rather than the dirty old man in the park saying, can you tell me the name of this, or can you tell me the name of that? I think anything that an adult says to a child that will be an arrestable offence in a park should be an arrestable offence in a school as well.
I'm sorry, I think this is rather confused. I'm not sure we're talking about preserving children's innocence or preserving their ignorance. I work in schools all the time. I was talking to teachers 2 or 3 days ago who were talking about Year 2 children, they're 5 and 7 years old, who are sending Valentine's cards. Let's not kid ourselves that young people...
Can't you see the difference between that and graphic sex education? I mean, can you not see the difference? That one is a story and it's romantic and it's quite sweet and it leaves their innocence entirely intact. And what we're talking about, which is graphic, one has to say, because it will be graphic, from people that are not related to them in any way and that they've no way of knowing that they're not a dirty old man. But they get used to it in the classroom. It's a very bad thing in today's climate.
Well, the international research evidence says otherwise.
Well,
we need Well, it's not a question of talk to the clinicians, talk to the health professionals, talk to the safeguarding
Okay.
people.
Here's a text. Sex and relations. Yes, it should be taught in schools as long as it's handled responsibly. By the time I start to discuss the nitty-gritty with my daughter, about 8 or 9, she'd already been told everything. Her best friend had been told by her mother. So it's much better if they're told consistent and sensible information at the same time. That's from Maureen. Before you two continue your very interesting conversation, let's hear a call, and let's hear from you if you want to call 0500 909 693. Jill.
Hello, Nicky.
Hello, Jill.
Hi. What I wanted to say about this is how about supporting parents to teach their children? You know, something so innocent and so vital to children really shouldn't be taught at 5 or even less, or until they're maybe 14, 15, 16. I mean, look at a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old in the supermarket when it's told it can't have sweets, and it just wants them more. You know, teachers have enough to do. We've got kids leaving school who can't read, who can't write, who can't socialise. It's just bonkers. It really is.
Isn't that like saying, well, we shouldn't teach history because they've got enough other things on their plate? You know, I mean, it's not...
No. I think there are some things which are proven to be vitally taught in schools without introducing all these new things. It just seems to me that this government particularly seems to think that just by passing legislation they can cure the world of all its ills.
Let me put that to John Rees. What about, should this not be parents? Should this not be inside the home at the point that people decide to broach these issues with their children? That's the argument, John Rees. What's your answer to it?
I would agree, absolutely. Of course, we need to work closely with parents, and any good sex and relationships education, or more appropriate relationships and sex education, as the House of Commons Committee are calling for, should be taught in consultation with parents. But we know that some parents find these things extraordinarily difficult to talk about.
4 in 10,000.
Yeah, that's why I say
withdraw their children.
Parents should be supported. I mean, if you look in a local directory of what's in your area, there are plenty of organisations which would help with this, which would advise with this.
Let's bring Sue in Dorset in, and Lynette, I'll come to you in a second with a question, maybe even a response from both of you, John and Lynette. Sue. Oh, yeah, I can hear myself wailing about in the background.
No, I'm going out of the room. Right.
It's never a good sign when I hear myself wailing in the background. There's quite enough wailing in the foreground. Sue.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. What about this? Are you for it or against it?
I'm for it. I think it's an important part of safeguarding. It's not to do with making children aware so that they can think, oh, I'll go and do that. It's not to do that. It's to do with protection. If something was happening to the child at that age, they wouldn't know what it was, maybe not even what to do. And so there's some simple guidelines about body awareness, what's right and wrong. That's actually protecting the child. That's giving them the tools to know what to do, what they can do. They can say no. They can tell someone. It's really, really important. And I don't think 5 is too early at all.
Okay, well, what about your own experience in your own life? Were you well equipped when you were young?
No, well, I'm a grandmother now, so I think I'm about your age.
40.
What?
40.
Oh, are you? Oh, okay. Oh,
No, I'm not. I'm lying. Anyway, carry on.
Anyway, sorry. So I'm a grandmother. So back in the 60s, I went to school, and actually I was things were happening within the family home with me. And I remember being in junior school, and I knew that things were happening, but I didn't know that it was wrong. Had no idea what it was. So maybe if I had been told,
my goodness, yeah,
the penny might have dropped. Who knows? I might have been able to do something.
Can I come in there, Nicky?
By all means, Lynette, yeah.
Well, this is such unrealistic tosh. First of all...
Well, to be respect, Sue was telling us, I think, that she was abused in the home when she was very, very young, and she wasn't. Nobody told her it was wrong.
Yes, okay. And for you, that's an absolutely killer argument when somebody says that. The fact that children were abused in the 60s and the letting it all hang out by people that they trusted, like at the BBC and other institutions, and they all knew about sex education, and they were all very primed up to it. But of course, it was quite normal. They have got more powerful people who are influencing them. And all this pitiful education, sex education, is like waving a handkerchief at an advancing army. I know that it's not right, but children can't protect themselves against it. The best thing they can do is to tell other adults in alarm. Do you know what he did? He's a dirty old man. There's something wrong with him.
John Rees.
Not to think that it's normal.
Actually, if you're a child and you're abused within the home by a family member, it's to do with grooming, and so it can be a relationship where you really do not know that it is wrong, and you do not know what it is, and it's not something that happened in the 60s, and it happens now, and it happens in the home, and that is fact.
Let me bring John in, and also Mark. John, I'll tell you what, I'll come to you in a second. Likewise, Lynette, but we've got Mark in Essex. Mark and Sue, do stay there.
Hello, Nicky, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mark. What's your point?
Two, if I may. What I'm hearing are old people, frankly, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but forgive me, bear with me. Old people who grew up a long time ago, and there's two things I hear from them. One is kids can't learn this, which is rubbish. What I think they really mean is it's too hard to teach, which is also rubbish. Kids are absolutely capable of taking this on board. I have an 8-year-old daughter. She understands the basics. They want to know what things are, what they do. They're not stupid. They point, what's that? And
how old's your daughter, did you say?
She's 8.
8, right.
But this isn't new. She also knows, and the rule is, if it's covered by your underwear, it's yours, and only you decide who sees it, touches it. And if anyone asks to see or touch whatever's covered by your underwear, we need to know. And there's not a lot of pressure about this. It's not a big issue. This is normal. This is the normal bringing up of small children. And like I say, people saying we can't do this, what they mean is they can't imagine how they could teach it. And the kids are more than capable.
What they mean is they don't want you teaching.
The second thing I'll say about people is I'm not interested in what the world was like in the 60s. I couldn't care less, and neither could my children. And I think we need to give this issue to the parents of young children to sort out now. I don't want to hear, with respect, old people who were brought up a long time ago telling us what it was like in their day, or how they see the world with rose-tinted glasses, or what they think the world should be, because I'm not interested.
The world as it is. Wait, everyone. He's quite saying the world as it is. You can in a second, but I just want to ask Lynette Burrows. Can I ask you a question? Because you described this as, when I read out what would be age appropriate on that bit of paper here that I'm informed about, and you described it as a kind of blurb, slightly dismissively, I might say. Yeah. But listen, where babies come from is the one thing. Say, cast yourself back in time. I know you're a mother. If your 4-year-old had said, "Where do babies come from?" what would you have told her? Or
I would have told them, and I have a large family, as you say. So, of course, there are lots of babies coming at different times to different other members of the family as well as your own. You tell them where they come from. What you don't have to go into is how they get there. Just that God put them there. They don't ever ask, in my experience.
God put them there?
Yes, or nature put them there. They just came. They haven't got the emotional equipment to understand copulation, human relationships, all that sort of thing. They're not ready for it. Parents always recognize that without.
What about Daddy gave Mummy a seed, and Mummy had a seed, and then it grew. Well, that's
I think that sounds so yucky. So the sort of thing dreamed up by the young man that we're talking to.
Sounds better than copulation, if you ask me. Okay, John Rees.
Parents protecting themselves.
John Rees.
To do with the kids.
John Rees.
It's parents protecting themselves.
John Rees.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, how anxious we become with this stuff. Like Indeed. Good parents.
Okay, where do babies come from? What do you say to a 4-year-old?
Oh, good. I think if I was asked that question in class, I would say that's not appropriate that we talk about it here and now. One of the things we've got to do is give teachers confidence and skills to be able to manage this in an age-appropriate way.
When is that appropriate, then? Where do babies come from? I've got here, age 3 to 6, nursery reception school, years 1 and 2. At this stage, this is what children are interested in. Where do babies come from?
I think we need to start. Good parents would start much younger. They're just simply naming simple names for simple parts of the body. We need to revisit.
Boo-boos. Yeah, come on.
Sorry?
How can you go much younger than 3 teaching them parts of the bodies? I mean, as a matter of fact, children left to themselves tend to come up with their own names for parts of their bodies.
Which is part of the confusion that people will feel. I'd also like just to move the debate on a little bit to talk about the relationships component. And as the
let's do that in a moment. Let's do that in a moment because that's very important. And I think we're going to have some travel news. Jill, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to get back to you. Lots of calls, lots of people having to. But thank you for getting in touch with us. Thank you, Sue. Good hearing from you. Thank you, Mark. He's talking about the here and now, the world as it is, not the world as it was. It's 9:22. Here's Michelle.
This is 5 Live Breakfast.
Starting in Hertfordshire, the
It's 9:24, very nearly. Sorry, I was a wee bit late with the travel. We've got Lynette Burrows, writer and broadcaster. We've got John Rees, educator, personal and social health education consultant, trains teachers and all this. We're talking about sex and relationship education. Should it be compulsory in primary schools or relationship and sex education, as Graham Stewart, the head of the Commons Education Committee, said it should be termed. Right, we've got David in London as well, and also Lara in Milton Keynes. Hello, Lara.
Hello.
I think some people would say it's important to call it relationship and sex rather than sex and relationship. Well, so how would you address the relationship side of this?
I think teaching children about relationships and sex at a young age is a great thing because it enables them to, ask questions and ask what's right and what's wrong. And by letting children ask questions, it's making the subject not taboo. It's making them, think that it's okay to talk about it and that it's not a secret thing. And so they don't want to go out and find about it themselves. You don't want them to be 12, 13, 14 and think, well, what is this thing that everyone's talking about? Why can't I ask questions? I'm going to go and find out myself. And that's when you end up with, teenagers becoming pregnant and not knowing what's happening to them and not being able to talk to anyone because they've been told that it's dirty when it's, completely fine in a loving relationship.
Stay there. Here's a response from David in London. Hello, David.
Hi there. Good morning, Nicky. Just listen to your caller there, and I think that by exposing children to such things at a young age, I think that's going to accentuate the problem of teenage pregnancies in itself. Now, I'm a young parent. Me and my girlfriend are 20. Are 30, and I'm 30 and she's 28, and our daughter's 7. Mm-hmm. And recently, we were sent a letter that the school were going to show them a video, but the parents should come and view the video first. Now, I declined to view it purely for the fact that no matter what, she's not going to view that video because that video has absolutely no interest in viewing that video.
Can you give us a description of the video without obviously, going
over? I didn't see it, but I'm hoping to catch up with some of the parents.
Did nobody tell you? I know you declined to watch it, but I just wonder if anyone told you what the kind of content.
It would have been about relationships. The topic was relationships, and I will presume it would have been, when you get into the different kinds of relationships that there are, and kids and things like that. And I just think that it would just totally go over her head. She just wouldn't comprehend any part of it. She just wouldn't understand it. She'll have no interest in it. I mean, she's in year 3. She has no interest in these sorts of things. And I think something we have to try and realize is that no matter what anybody tries to say, this country was built on certain morals that are based around Christianity, and we have to try and think to ourselves: it is showing kids videos.
What morals are those based around Christianity specifically? Just to help us out here.
Well, we're talking about not corrupting the mind. We're talking about not showing them the best path forward, which we're talking about just trying to just educate them in the best possible way.
Okay,
I think you're wrong about that.
Oh, go on, Laura. Why?
I just think that you say your 7-year-old's too young to know about relationships. Well, I bet your child's at school playing mummies and daddies and dressing up and playing kitchen at home, pretending she's a mum with a baby and like children do and have a dolly. And when they're 10, 11 and they go to school and their friends are talking about, having a boyfriend and, holding a boy's hand like they do, that will go on to her being told about the wrong things and about, her friends have said this, so she must believe it's true, and all her friends are doing it, so it's right.
David, on Christian principles, for example, obviously as a man of faith, I am inferring from what you say. What about, say, the Christmas story? What if, your daughter, when she was 4, saying, virgin birth? What's a virgin? What would you say, David?
That's a difficult question. To be honest, she hasn't asked me.
Mary, the virgin birth, vital, absolutely key to the Christmas story.
Yeah. To be honest, she knows that.
Sorry, Lynette?
I say a virgin is a young woman. And that's all that you need to say to a young child. You don't have to go into gory details. I mean, the point is, really, this is about privacy. The children, that's why I said to you, they invent their own words for their privy parts, because it's a private affair to them. And if you keep it private, they're much better able to defend it. How do they know the difference between somebody talking dirty to them in the classroom and somebody talking dirty to them in the park? They don't. That the young woman who says, it helps them protect themselves has got it quite wrong.
Careful, don't all speak at once. John in Wales, respond to that. Hello, John. Good morning. Welcome to the programme.
Hi, Nicky. I used to live in Holland, and they teach children in Holland from the age of 4 about sex education, and they start off pretty slowly. So I got a lot of Dutch friends with kids, and they start off very, very slowly, and it's brought up all through their education. But there's one fact about Holland which has been proved. They have a quarter of teenage pregnancies, what we have. And they also have a lot lower sexually transmitted diseases. Yeah. Most of the Dutch, they don't like the red light districts, but they tolerate it because they know that things like that go on. And it's a far, far better system.
Yes, but the point is that if a young girl in Holland, whenever they raise Holland, they never mention the fact that if they get pregnant, they don't get any assistance from the state, they don't get any free contraceptives in schools. It's very selectively taught, heavily targeted on poor and immigrant areas.
Okay, John. Yeah, it's John in Wales, first of all.
It's entirely up to the headmaster of a school whether he has it or not.
John, come back on that.
Hello?
John, come back on that. John in Wales.
Look, they are given free contraceptions if they want.
Not at school.
Yes, there is still, they get help from the state as well.
No, they don't.
They don't have, yes, they do.
Lynette Burrows, what about, and John Rees, just to wrap this section up, John Rees, and of course, I suppose there's a big argument as well to say that it's important to teach young children about different types of relationship, not just between men and women, but men and women are women, John Rees.
Absolutely. I would also go
back. At what age?
From when they start school. We need to start being... Young people are exposed to storylines from EastEnders and from Coronation Street. Youngsters are also exposed, probably hugely inappropriately, to Grand Theft Auto. And when they're displaying sexualized behavior in the playground, we need to deal with that appropriately. We also need to pick up and work with parents and make sure that parents still have the right to withdraw their children from sex and relationships if, after careful discussion with the school, they really feel that isn't appropriate for their child. We've got to give skills to teachers. We've got to give them the confidence to do this, partly to address the health issues and partly to address the breakdown in society. We've got to get people to be able to communicate with each other, and that helps with children's learning. From
an early age, telling them about Lynette Burrows' last thought, different relationships with men and women, men and men, women and women. That's important, isn't it?
and friends. And
Lynette Burrows.
I would say that this is what literature and songs and stories are all about, teaching relationship. But they're artists doing it, not teachers doing it. And that's where children get all their stories, and it's quite true.
Different types of relationship. Is it important to teach very young children about different types of relationship in modern society?
No, you can't. I mean, yes, I think it's very important that they know all the stories and that sort of thing, but taking sex out of context and producing a set of facts is something that not only destroys their own sense of privacy and their vulnerability, and it makes them think that it's normal, and that's the biggest danger of all.
Well, OK, thank you very much. So lots of thoughts coming in on that. Thank you both. Quick text from Susie. I asked my mum, how'd you have a baby? After my baby brother was born, I was a very sensible 9-year-old. She wouldn't tell me anything and said I wouldn't understand, despite me pleading with her. She never ever told me anything, including about having periods. Thank you, David in London and John in Wales, and also to Lara and our other callers. Right, we've got some financial news.
This is 5 Live.
It is. Good morning, 9:42. Should relationship and sex education be compulsory in schools? We're going to talk to Lucy Emerson from the Sex Education Forum. Hello, Lucy.
Hello, good morning.
Morning. Also, Yogini in London. I hope that's right. And Desi
hello.
in Kendal. Morning, both. A couple of texts for you. Interesting text. The lady who keeps talking about dirty old men in the park, Lynette Burrows, should understand that the vast majority of abused children are abused by people they know and trust. Teaching them the confidence to understand what's right and wrong could only be a good thing. Ultra-conservative older generation's part of the problem, not the solution. That was that point there about abuse was made by a survivor earlier on, Sue in Dorset, who rang us. This is coming from Alan. There's too much sexualisation of children. They're forced to grow up far too quickly. Let them be children, not allow grown-ups to affect them so much. We should not force our prejudices on them. We should try and fix society, not turn children into adults to allow them to cope. Desi, what would you like to say this morning? Good morning.
Hi. Well, I actually was taught sex at school at a very young age. I was part of a pilot project. I think it must have been in the late 60s, and I think it was called Merry-Go-Round. And we were just taught sex as part of the timetable. It was nothing unusual for us, obviously, because we were little. And so I can just reassure everybody, it's really easy to make stuff like this age-appropriate. It's really informative. It's not nasty. You don't see videos of people having sex or anything like that at all. And it's really, really fantastic. I didn't have my children until I was in my late 30s. I had sex for the first time when I was 19. And as far as I understand it, all the research shows that that is the case, that when people do have very good, clear sex education, actually teenage pregnancies falls, average age of starting sex is raised, and so on and so on. So I don't know why. I think what I was on was part of a pilot project, and it must never have caught on. I just think there wasn't the political will to do it. But certainly there was a whole tranche of people, because I am really your age, who had sex education in this country, in infant school, and it was super.
A pilot project, really interesting. And I tell you what, let's get a couple of teachers on, Desi. We've got, before I come to Lucy, sorry, but we've got Emma in Warwick, who I see has called us. Hello, Emma.
Hi there, Nicky.
Hi there, and Shelley in Hampshire, primary school teacher. So Shelley, Emma, Shelley, both of you meet the world. Shelley,
hello.
Right, what's your experience of this issue with very young children, Shelley?
I just wanted to take Lynn Burrows' point from earlier about children experiencing relationships through stories and things like that. And in my experience, many children come to school without a rich experience of story, and so therefore they wouldn't have that to draw on. And also, she often referred to dirty old men. Well, you know, if the dirty old men are people that are within their family doing things that are wrong to them, they're unlikely to have been told that.
That's what Sue said.
So they need someone to. They need someone from outside to inform them of that. And I agree with the previous caller. It can do nothing, if it's done in the right way, it can do nothing but enhance those children's safety. And that's really important. God knows there's enough for us to teach at the moment to squeeze in, but I think it's really, really important.
Somebody said that earlier on. Teachers have got quite enough on their plates without having to, so...
Prioritising, though, isn't it? What I would say, though, is there's no the initial teacher training doesn't include any training on this, and I think it could be really welcomed by lots of people would welcome some training on it.
All right, Emma, do you agree with, Shelley?
Hi there, yeah, I do. I mean, I think that, young people just need to know the facts. I think your previous caller talked about over-sexualisation of young people, and that's a massive problem, but there's a huge information gap out there that young people are just not getting the facts about, what sex is and how babies are made and, how to have healthy relationships. And I think schools have a massive part to play in that.
What do you think the consequences of that information gap, I think that's how you put it, are for our society?
Well, young people not valuing themselves, having unhealthy sexual relationships. I mean, we're seeing the rise of child sexual exploitation because people are not having, information given to them.
Have we seen the rise of it, or is it just better identified now? I just wonder.
I can't answer that, Nicky. I don't know.
No.
I mean,
I would speculate that it's always been there. We just talk about it more now, which is a good thing, and it's exposed more now. But the big question is how to give children the power to deal with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in schools we're certainly seeing the rise of it. Again, whether it's just the teachers who are better at spotting it and dealing with it, I'm not sure. But, we're certainly seeing that in schools. But I just think sometimes we can overcomplicate things and we can put an adult's head onto a child's shoulders. And children just see the world very simply. I mean, I've talked to my son who's 6 about the fact that men fall in love with men, women fall in love with women. That happens, and he accepts that and he doesn't question it. And, he asked me about where babies come from, and I told him very simply how it happens. And again, he's moved on. He's on to the next toys, on to the next TV programme. I think as adults we can overcomplicate it sometimes and put our head on their shoulders.
I would totally agree with that in my experience as well.
Well, it's nice to have some agreement in this half hour of the programme, because it sure as heck wasn't happening in the first half hour of the programme. Lucy Emerson from the Sex Education Forum. It's all about what is age appropriate, isn't it? Because some parents, some mums and dads are concerned about this and worried about it, Lucy.
Yes. It was very reassuring to hear Emma and Shelley and Desi talking from their perspective as parents and teachers, saying, look, this subject can be taught simply, it can be easy, it can be age appropriate. And here at the Sex Education Forum we fully welcome these recommendations for statutory sex and relationships education in primary and secondary. And I think this will start more conversations to help people understand what would be taught to younger children. So,
can you tell us what would be taught to younger children?
Well, in our resources, we advise that in the younger years in primary, you're teaching children words to describe different parts of their body, words to talk about their bodies and boundaries, to understand the difference between safe and unwanted touch and how to get help. So that's the real safety messages there that children need to know when they're young, because younger children are particularly vulnerable if they don't have that basic, simple knowledge given to them in a way that they would understand. And then you also learn about friendships, family, how you relate to each other, using those relationships that you know as a child, and then building on that so that as you're maturing and facing adolescence, you've got some skills and language and knowledge to help you and guide you towards safer and more equal relationships.
They've got appalling teenage pregnancy levels in the States. It puts us in the shade. I wonder why that is. I mean, any thoughts?
Well, in the States...
Also curiously, curiously, it's one of the most religious societies in the world.
In the United States, there isn't any consistent provision of one type of sex and relationships education or another, and to some extent that mirrors the situation here, although we've got different cultural dynamics. There's such a range at the moment in our schools today in terms of the quality and the quantity of sex and relationships education lessons provided. And I'm really hopeful that from these recommendations we might get those pilots that Desi experienced back in the 1960s to be programs that every child can expect to have as part of their learning in primary and secondary school. And then we can really measure what we're doing, and I think we'll see a difference in terms of teenage pregnancy as well, because all the evidence supports that.
Right. Paul in Glasgow. Hello, Paul. And Yogini as well in London. Right. Yogini, first of all.
Hi.
Hi, Yogini. Yeah.
Hi. I think it's a really interesting debate. I'm a parent of 2 very small children, 3.5 and 1.5, and my daughter will be starting school in September. So it's very relevant to me personally. I remember as a child being given sex education in junior school and finding it very valuable. And my parents were also invited to view a video that we would be shown in the classroom. And most parents agreed for their children to see the video and be given that session on sex education. I also remember hearing about things in the playground and being utterly horrified at what I was being told. And it was much better, I found, in a kind of safe, organised environment, being told by teachers and knowing that my parents were also kind of approving of what was being taught, and then we could go home and talk about it afterwards. So I'd hope that I'd be able to offer the same to my own children. And I think age appropriateness is just so important. Children grow up at different rates. Some children are more ready than others, both physically and emotionally. Some children start puberty at primary school, and so they need to know what's going to happen to them before it happens. Otherwise, it can be quite distressing for them. So I think that's really important. I think it's very important to involve parents.
Yeah.
Because they know their children better than anyone.
Yes, involving parents, Lucy Emerson, sometimes that's going to work, sometimes it's not going to work, sometimes parents will be extremely uncomfortable, Lucy.
Well, from Eugenia's example, the school was able to tell parents what they were teaching, and this is really good practice, but it's not happening in all schools today, and this is something else that the MPs are pushing for, to have more communication from school to home about what the school is doing, and that will support parents with their role at home, because they do know their child's own development best, and they want to have those conversations at home to back up what's happening in school.
You mentioned cultural differences. What if a parent were to come and say, I find this, for whatever cultural or religious reasons, I find this unacceptable and I'm taking my child out of these classes? What would you say anything to persuade them otherwise? And if so, what?
Well, my advice to the school would be to make sure that parent has seen the resources that are going to be used, has seen how they're going to be used, has had a full and frank discussion about what their potential objections are. And if that parent has decided that they can't go through with those lessons for whatever reason that's going to be, the school can still support them. I've come across schools who've worked with faith communities and have had lending libraries of books that the parents can use, and parents have come in their own time and run smaller sessions with parents who've got a particular reason for wanting to do the work, and they're talking themselves. So there are ways of bridging these gaps, and communication is the key. Adult embarrassment has held things back for a long time.
I don't want my child taught about pornography. What's your answer?
My answer again?
Did you probably that wasn't a call.
Oh,
that
sorry.
was me asking you. I was role playing. So if somebody says to you, "I don't want my child taught about pornography," what's your answer?
Well, I hear.
Who's that in the background? Forum. I heard someone in the background. Who was it?
So it was me, Eugenie. Can I?
Yes, please feel free, and then I'll come to Paul. Eugenie.
I think it's so important to give children the right information. There is a massive information overload at the moment. Children in primary school have mobile phones and are texting and have got smartphones. It's out there already. And if we don't take back control of what's going on and direct our children accordingly, they're going to be way, way ahead of us and have incorrect facts, lots of information that they don't know what to do with, and then they'll be unsafe.
Paul, good morning.
I would want it to be done in a tactful, age-appropriate way.
Good morning.
Eugenie, let me bring Paul in, who's been waiting a while, and I'm hoping to come to Andrew as well. Paul, what would you like to say?
Good morning, Nicky. I can remember this happened to us. I've got a boy now in S1, a high school in S1, and he's a well-behaved boy. At the age of 7, we got a letter home from primary school. We were horrified. Sex education. You see him cuddling his toy in bed, and you think the last thing he needs is sex education. So I went up there with a total attitude of, this is wrong. I came away thinking it's actually quite a good idea, because basically they bring it in such a way, as I was showing, that it starts off with relationships with lollipop men. It's all to do with police and where they all come from, and they gradually bring in the sex education. He comes home and asks questions, and by the time he gets to primary 7, I went back to the same teacher I spoke to and said to her, yeah, it was a good idea, because they grow so much from 7 up to primary 7, and really it was the best thing ever, actually, because it gave them life skills that we weren't thinking about at the time. Things that he needs to know. The kids are actually asking these questions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The kids are asking these questions. The question is, how do we answer them? Is it parents or is it teachers? Becky's got in touch with us. I want to bring Becky onto the programme. Good morning, Becky. Tell us your story.
Yes, morning, Nicky. My daughter was started in reception, was touched inappropriately by a little boy, and it was dealt with, and he was monitored at playtime, etc. And then he'd be quiet for a little while, and then perhaps 6 months later he'd do it again. He'd be monitored, etc. Then 6 months he'd do it. Then eventually did it in front of teachers in the classroom, which eventually led to his exclusion from school because of it, because it was now a proper sexual assault.
We lost your line there for a second. Am I right in saying he did it in front of teachers and then he was excluded, yeah?
Eventually.
No.
Eventually, yeah, he's now excluded and he's now seeking appropriate help because clearly this isn't acceptable behaviour. But I feel that if he'd been aware of it earlier on, and perhaps my daughter knew that this sort of touching wasn't appropriate, then
it's a terrible line. But you said a reception. It's not your fault. You said reception, so presumably 4 or 5 years old.
4 or 5 years old was the initial incident, and then it was on a sort of 6 monthly basis that it would happen. He'd be quiet, and then he'd do it again, and then he'd be quiet and do it again, and it culminated in this last incident where he was in the class and he walked past her and he touched her inappropriately, just sat at her desk, and it was that was the final straw.
And did he receive help? And I'm just wondering, where on earth did he learn that behaviour?
Well, that's it. The social services did go into his home to investigate, to see perhaps there was something at home that he was being exposed to, but all the research said that no, it was fine. And because it was deemed to be a low-level sort of assault, that there was no help given to him. But finally now, because he's been excluded, he is getting support, and he is being, I don't know where he's being schooled now, but he is getting the help that he needed, the help that obviously wasn't available to him elsewhere.
But Becky, thank you very much indeed. Very powerful call, and but begs a lot of questions, doesn't it? We've only got about 50 seconds. Andrea, I promise to come to you. You haven't got a lot of time, but use it how you want.
Hello. I'd just like to say that a lot of parents are talking a lot of sense here. It's about age-appropriate conversations. The children will ask questions, and the way that you develop a loving, trusting relationship with them is by answering those questions and giving them the information, and then they build confidence in you and can come back and ask again.
Where do babies come from?
Where do babies come from? Apart from the mummy, apart from the daddy, they grow in mummy's tummy. I've had a section and I've had a natural birth, so I've told her they can be cut out or they can come out of your bottom. These are things that you shouldn't be afraid of discussing, because it's a natural, wonderful thing to have a child, and if they understand that the primary purpose is to make a new life, then that's got to be a good thing.
Thank you,
All the
Andrea.
other stuff can come after.
You did it beautifully. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the calls and the discussion. That's it from me. See you tomorrow.
That was Nicky. This is 5 Live Daily. Picture this: you marry the light of your life, only for the light of your life to go out and vanish when he or she's immigration papers come through. We'll be speaking to a woman that happened to.
First for breaking news and the best live sport. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Should sex and relationship classes be compulsory in primary schools? What do you think? The Commons Education Committee said absolutely. They've concluded without statutory status, schools wouldn't give curriculum time to personal, social and health education and sex and relationship education. And these are sensitive subjects. Teachers need to be confident, have the skills to deliver effective and proper classes, but it's absolutely vital that on an age-appropriate basis they are taught. 3 to 6 years old, we're talking about the differences between boys and girls, naming body parts, using correct scientific vocabulary, which is vital for safety, it is argued, where babies come from, what areas of the body are private, should not be touched, who they should talk to if they are worried or concerned. Let's talk to Lynette Burrows, writer and broadcaster. Good morning.
Good morning.
And John Rees, personal, social and health education consultant, trains teachers on how to talk to young people about sex. Hello, John.
Good morning.
Lynette Burrows, this is entirely sensible, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is. It's just more of the same that's failed so drastically, really, in the past. I mean, age appropriate. I'm listening to your little blurb for it. It all sounds such...
Well, the international research evidence says otherwise.
Well...
We need... Well, it's not a question of to talk to the clinicians, talk to the health professionals, talk to safeguarding
Okay.
Here's a text. Sex and relations. Yes, it should be taught in schools as long as it's handled responsibly. By the time I start to discuss the nitty-gritty with my daughter, about 8 or 9, she'd already been told everything. Her best friend had been told by her mother. So it's much better if they're told consistent and sensible information at the same time. That's from Maureen. Before you two continue your very interesting conversation, let's hear... a call, and let's hear from you if you want to call 0500 909 693. Jill.
Hello, Nicky.
Hello, Jill.
Hi. What I wanted to say about this is how about supporting parents to teach their children? You know, something so innocent and so vital to children really shouldn't be taught at 5 or even less, or until they're maybe 14, 15, 16. I mean, look at a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old in the supermarket when it's told it can't have sweets. And
education, it's a teaching about relationships education. It's not just primary schools the House of Commons Select Committee are recommending, but right through to secondary schools. We live in a society where young people are preyed upon and are vulnerable to, and I think we've got to give them the skills and the values and the information to be able to keep themselves safe.
But how does telling them about something that they haven't got an interest in at 3 and 4 years old, and they don't have the emotional experience to deal with when they're 7 and 8 years old, how does that make them safer?
I think it's not just a question of working with children. It's a question of working with schools, with working with parents.
No, I'm talking about young children. Accepted sex education for secondary children is a different matter. The controversial area is primary school children.
And why is that controversial?
Because they're far too young for it, and people have always recognised that young children have a period of innocence. Sexuality is very latent when they're very young, and actually crashing in on that with all sorts of information given to them by adults that they're in no position to understand, have been empowered to do this, rather than the dirty old man in the park saying, can you tell me the name of this, or can you tell me the name of that? I think anything that an adult says to a child that will be an arrestable offence in a park should be an arrestable offence in a school as well.
I'm sorry, I think this is rather confused. I'm not sure we're talking about preserving children's innocence or preserving their ignorance. I work in schools all the time. I was talking to teachers 2 or 3 days ago who were talking about Year 2 children, they're 5 and 7 years old, who are sending Valentine's cards. Let's not kid ourselves that young people...
Can't you see the difference between that and graphic sex education? I mean, can you not see the difference? That one is a story and it's romantic and it's quite sweet and it leaves their innocence entirely intact. And what we're talking about, which is graphic, one has to say, because it will be graphic, from people that are not related to them in any way, and that they've no way of knowing that they're not a dirty old man. But they get used to it in the classroom. It's a very bad thing in today's climate. Piffle to me. I mean, age appropriate to 3 and 4 year olds. I mean, come on. And the best protection that children have, in my opinion, is reticence and modesty. And the fact that when any adult starts talking dirty to them, their danger signs should flash and the child should run. As my mother always used to say, if anybody stops in a car and asks you to get in, just run. And that's their greatest protection, because they can't argue about it. And lulling them into a false sense that the whole world is benign by talking sex to them when they're too young to understand what it's all about. They are not aware of the fact that they've got paedophiles around them in other circumstances. So no, I'm dead against it.
John?
I'm just drawing breath, I think. Goodness, I'm really surprised to hear those comments. It would be lovely to think that we could wrap children in cotton wool and safeguard them from all the horrors and the evils and nasty things happening out of the world. But we know that we live in an extraordinarily sexualized society. And I think we also need to remember that this is not just about teaching sex.